All right, here we go. People are filtering in, watching the attendee count move up in the northward fashion. Welcome, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on what part of this spinning rock you are coming in from. My name is Adam Luckroth. Today, we are presenting a journey into data and analytics, how to succeed in your first analytics role. And boy, do we have the perfect crew. Yes, we have a crew of people talking about this. So very excited about that. Couple housekeeping items. As you all know, you can ask questions. There is a Q&A module. That's the best place to ask questions. You can ask questions in the chat, but it's going to be much harder for us to get at those. So ask them in that Q&A module and we'll get to as many as we can. And feel free to hit that chat. Shout out where you're coming in from, what you're looking for. Have fun, be respectful, of course, but use the chat amongst yourselves and get some networking in. Might as well at the same time. Quick word from our sponsors. Tessellation is a modern analytics consultancy. We enable and manage organizations, analytics, and self-service teams by educating people, optimizing technology, developing world-class products, and providing sustainable results. Also brought to you by Data Coach, where most analytics training programs lack depth. Data Coach provides wisdom. Our modern curriculum is unparalleled, comprising video lessons, hands-on exercises, and a capstone project designed around your company's data. Data Coach also offers a truly premium service, one-on-one coaching. There are coupon codes available too, so maybe I'll drop mine in the chat. I better not do that because we're having a little friendly competition amongst the entire team on who can push the most coupon codes out. But we'll make sure everyone gets a coupon code if you're interested in Data Coach. With that said, I mentioned a crew. It's more of a party, and the host of your party is Jen Hunter. So Jen, why don't you take it over?
Thank you very much, Adam, and welcome everybody. We're going to begin this journey with three fine analysts that are going to help me out and kind of show you guys what they've been up to. So as Adam mentioned, I'm sort of your host, but I think I can also offer a lot of insight here. I am a former math teacher turned analyst consultant. So I too had to, enter the industry as a new person and figure out my way. Since I've been in analytics, I've worked in industries across retail, CPG, higher education, and healthcare. I actually joined Tessellation this year, and I can say it's really been an awesome ride. And in addition to consulting here, I do lead the Pittsburgh Tableau user group. So coming at you guys from Pittsburgh, as you can see by my lovely terrible towel in my picture. That was actually at the last in-person Tableau conference. And I also have been a Tableau user group ambassador for 3 years. So I tend to talk to a lot of people who are entering the industry, whether that's, they want to learn about Tableau or just analytics in general. So hopefully I can shed some light for you guys here today. At Tessellation, I specialize on the data viz side, and I work primarily. Tableau is my tool of choice, though I like to branch out, and I'm learning every day. And I also have a lot of background in COE. So, obviously I'm very involved in the Pittsburgh Tableau community and the broader Tableau community in general. And I've done a lot of training. So what are we going to talk about today? So obviously we're going to start with, we have three analysts here from Tessellation. They're going to do their introductions and kind of explain to you guys how they got into the industry. We do have a mixed bag of those just entering the industry, not coming from another industry, so maybe internships, schooling, that kind of thing, and others that were exposed to analytics and decided that they wanted to do those analytics other than being in different roles. And then our main event, so what main topics are we going to talk about? I think the obvious one is the technical upskilling, right? To be in data and analytics, you sort of need to have a tool bag, right? To solve the problems that you encounter, you're going to need some sort of tool to do that. In addition to that, you need to be an excellent communicator, right? How can you figure out whoever your end user is going to be, how to best communicate the information that you're presenting. And then we're going to talk about dealing with ambiguity. A lot of change happens in analytics. So you have to learn to deal with that change and how best to do that. And then goal setting. How do you kind of ensure that the things that you're doing and the tools that you're learning, that you're setting goals for yourself and you're kind of continuously learning? This industry always changes, so you never really want to stay comfortable. So how do you kind of ensure that you're progressing? And then finally, we're going to have our analysts show you some of their accomplishments or a highlight from their career here at Tessellation so far. As Adam mentioned, as we're talking, if you have a question, I'm going to try and moderate that. So feel free to throw it in the chat if it deals with what we're talking about. Otherwise, we will also try to answer questions at the end. They are going to do their own introductions, but as you can see, our panelists are Mitch, Jake, and Sunny. Here at Tessellation, they're across a broad range of projects and tools. So you'll get kind of a nice plethora of experiences here. What do our analysts here at Tessellation do? So really their role is to be a sponge, right? They're going to soak up as much as they can. We want to give them as much exposure to different projects and tools as they can. So not only can they figure out where their interests lie, but kind of figure out where their strengths lie and figure out what they need to work on and do in order to kind of grow in their roles. So without further ado, Mitch, I'm going to let you take it away first.
Hey, everybody. I'm Mitch. I'm one of the first analysts you'll hear from. I joined Tessellation about 4 months ago, and it's been a great ride so far. My background is actually in biology and public health. I was on an academic track for a while after graduating from undergrad and through a master's program, including doing a fellowship at the National Institutes of Health. And it was during that time that I kind of realized the work that I liked doing was the data management, the data enablement, and then the communication, sort of not actually really the analysis in the middle, but what happens on both ends. I found that really exciting. And I sort of discovered that working as a data manager for an HIV research lab. I did like 6 months of work and enabled a dozen researchers to publish multiple papers. And I thought that was really cool. And so as I was finishing my master's program, I realized, wow, okay, I want to do those two things. Where do I go? And I had realized that academia was not for me. I wanted to be more involved with sort of directly translating data into the world. And Tessellation caught my eye. I hadn't really considered consulting, but as I thought about it more, I realized that Tessellation is a place that really focuses on helping people to use their data. That's the first thing I liked. And then being really good at communicating what the people find to help, their companies, their organizations, or themselves do better. So I thought, well, can I do that? Why me? And I think I don't have to belabor that, public health and science are, they're very analytical. So I had that mindset going. And as I thought about it, I realized that there's a lot of similarity in public health thinking and business thinking. It's often, how do you use limited resources and time to take limited data that you have and prevent a problem, improve a function, or gain even more from your solution and do it better, faster, cheaper, and easier. And so I sort of found that parallel and really focused in on that when I was considering what to do, when I was interviewing, and when I'm doing my work now. And so just a little background too, as I realized that, consulting might be a role, I dug into doing a lot of online trainings on top of, my master's program. And then I just worked at having a strong LinkedIn page. I engaged a lot. That's how I got interviews with Tessellation, was through LinkedIn. And I made sure that I had a good portfolio of, one of the tools that Tessellation uses, Tableau.
Hey everyone, I'm Jake McNuck, or known on LinkedIn as the Data Dude, if you guys are connected with me. I graduated from Cal State Fullerton in Information Systems and Decision Sciences, also minored in marketing as well. So kind of always knew that I wanted to get into an analytical field, but like a lot of you probably didn't really know how to jump into it without having a lot of experience. So what I did was I jumped into sales initially, and I became a intern at Alteryx under their business development representative section, and worked with the sales teams there. During that time, I also was a lean operations and supply chain academic intern at Safariland. It's a really long name for just, we went in there and helped them analytically with we did some time series analysis for them, and then helped kind of document some lean practices that they could apply and help them out a little bit. I got into analytics and knew that I wanted to do it. I've been a baseball player my whole life. I'm left-handed, so probably made it farther playing baseball than most people would. I wasn't good by any stretch, but I got to play semi-professionally. And growing up playing baseball, baseball has a bunch of statistics that they collect, and I kind of just fell in love with being able to, predict if a player was going to do better that day, or if they were going to get injured or not. When I was at Cal State Fullerton, I met the lead analyst for the baseball team there, and he was doing a lot of really cool things with R, and he was collecting a bunch of statistics that I didn't even know baseball teams collected, and he was actively making the program better. After he signed on, the teams had less injuries and less. They knew when they needed to give training to certain players and whatnot. So I saw firsthand that analytics can really change an organization. And that's kind of how I found out about Alteryx. I was doing a club at my college called the Sales Leadership Center. Alteryx was a partner and offered me a scholarship, and then gave me a chance to come interview for an internship there. So did that for a while. And it was one of the best experiences that I've ever had. Alteryx is a great company too. And then I have a lot of friends that are just involved in the analytics world that help me upskill on the side. Still meet with people to this day to go over SQL and all the things that analysts like to do. During 2021, I was included in the on Analytica's report for Analytics Ambassador Leader. And then during that time, I got Alteryx Core certified, and then a few other certifications and things like that. And to this day, I still have a pretty strong passion for continuously learning and teaching other people what I've learned.
All right, so last but not least, I'm going. I have pretty similar experience with Jake in terms of coming from a sports and a sales background. So for me, I was always a golfer growing up. I thought I was gonna do it professionally. I ended up playing it at Columbia, and with a political science degree. And after college, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do next. So I ended up going into sales. I had a couple of different sales roles. My first role at Smart Design, it really kind of showed me how important data is, even something like sales, and how so many companies have issues with their data. And that's the first time the whole idea of working in data came into my head. And so then with my most recent job at Wix, I was working throughout the pandemic. And it was obviously a very tough time for sales. I was not having a good time, and I ended up getting laid off sort of in the middle of the pandemic. And then after that, I was like, okay, let me transition, figure out what I want to do next. And then I started drawing back on some of the previous experiences that I had with analytics. One of the things was when I was at Columbia, had a chance to talk to a Columbia professor who came up, similar to what Jake said with baseball. He came up with an advanced golf statistic that kind of transformed the way I was looking at the game before. I won't bore you with the details, but basically it was a different way of looking at it. And with it gave me a lot more insight to the game, and it changed the way I practice. And with that, it definitely opened to my eyes to how analytics can really transform what you think you know really well, because golf is a game that I played, for 15 years, and now I'm seeing it in a totally different way. So I thought that was really cool. And I'd always had a passion for numbers and finding patterns in data, similar to what Jake says, like with sports and stuff like that. I would go deep into baseball statistics, basketball, football. I'd be interested in advanced statistics, trying to predict what's going to happen in the future, trying to see who's going to play well that year. So that had always interested me, but I didn't see how I could do it in an actual job. And that's when I talked to one of my friends who was a data engineer, and he really introduced me to the world of data and analytics in terms of the business world. And he gave me a couple of examples of how you see that in everyday life. For example, with Spotify and their recommended playlists, that all comes from different data scientists building models and stuff like that. And then recommendation engines for Netflix and things like that. And that's something that really struck with me. And I was like, wow, I know what I want to do going forward. I want to do analytics. And then from then on, I'm sure many of you are in a similar position right now and are trying to figure out, how do you get from there to actually getting a job? So that's the tough part, and we'll get into more of it later. But to put it briefly, for me, I thought I wanted to do data science. And I was like, okay, let me do data science. And I learned Python, SQL, all the tools, but I realized to get a job, to really get into it, it's easier to go into analytics first and then get into it. And that's when I picked up Tableau, which is a great tool for data visualization. And the way that I was able to get the job with Tessellation is through LinkedIn, as well as having a strong Tableau public profile. I had a lot of good visualizations, which proved that I was actually able to have these skills and would be able to apply them in a work setting. And I think that's something that really set me apart.
Thank you so much, guys. And, before we kind of jump into the success factors and how, each of these three guys has used these skills to kind of grow their careers, I think it's very important to note, and that is a question that already came in, what are the best ways to transfer from other fields to data and analytics? Hopefully it's clear just by their intros, right? Jake, I believe, was the only one that actually even had a semi-analytics background in schooling, right? So he kind of knew he wanted to do that, but both Mitch and Sunny kind of turned their expertise and just sort of figured out, what do I want through the different experiences that they were exposed to, and just kind of, worked toward that goal. And I think it's very important too. We all have connections, right? And we have people across several fields. Think about, if you're trying to transition into the analytics field, what is it that you enjoy? Is it a certain background like Mitch in his science background, right? And that kind of led him to analytics in his area, or maybe even a personal hobby or something like that, similar to like Sunny and Jake. And, maybe it's starting out in a different position and figuring out what you don't want, right? And getting to that analytics position. So now let's focus, you have the job, you're starting out in the role. What things should you be looking towards in terms of growing your career? So obviously the first one is your technical skill, right? How do you create your own experiences in that? And the first one is, well, how do I choose a tool, or how did you choose your tool? So very briefly, and Jake, Mitch, and Sunny, feel free to all jump in this. I think a lot of us get exposed to a tool through either schooling or some sort of job, or somebody that we know. Maybe it's even a blog post that you saw. Hey, I saw this Power BI blog post. Well, that kind of looks like a cool tool. I think a lot of people tend to do it by needing to solve a problem. Again, whether that's in a role or in as a hobby. I know my first experience with Tableau was because I had a job where we had no analytical tool. I was working mostly in R, and we needed some sort of data visualization tool that business users could be exposed to. I had briefly heard of this tool called Tableau in an internship, didn't really get to use it, and I decided, hey, why not? So mine was just basically, that was a tool that I knew of, and I grew to love it. And that's pretty much how I chose my tool. And then from there, it was, solving problems, meeting client expectations, or just meeting the needs of my job that have led to the other tools that I've upskilled in. What about you guys?
Yeah, I think you kind of fall into picking your tools. I think the main thing really when you're in school is you're focusing on kind of the underlying attributes that you need to learn to actually use a tool effectively. Once you actually kind of get into the business world, it is you're trying to use the tool to solve a problem. And whether it's Data Coach and Tessellation, we focus heavily on Snowflake, Alteryx, Tableau, and Power BI. But there's a bunch of different tools out there, and so it's first kind of what are you going to be able to solve the business problem with. Also, what's the best way to kind of deploy that solution on an enterprise level so that everyone else in your enterprise can use that kind of same tool and you can share those business insights.
Yeah, for me, jumping in, looking at it from a learning perspective, like if you're trying to get into the industry, I think a big thing for me is seeing what you're interested in, as well as seeing what's popular in the market. So for me, I was always interested in doing data visualization, but I started doing it with Python first. So like Matplotlib and like with code, which was it's not an efficient way to do it. And when I'd be applying for jobs, I'd always see Tableau pop up, and I didn't really know what Tableau was. And then from there, I started, researching in Tableau and looking into it. And I was like, oh, wow, like this is a really powerful tool for data visualization. So I think combining those two things is a good way to figure out your tools.
Awesome. And I think to the next point, right, once you choose a tool or tools possibly, right, you might need more than one. There's various modes of learning, right? And you also need to figure out what's the best way that you learn. Given the pandemic that we've all gone through, I know virtual learning, right, is probably more of an option now or more of a requirement now than in-person learning, or where you can go to a class or take learnings at conferences and things like that. So I think your mode of learning is important too, because you can do asynchronous. I know here at Tessellation, our data coach tool actually provides you like a learning guide to help you keep on track, meet markers, and actually accomplish your goals. If you're someone like me, I sort of need to see those marker points, right, to kind of complete the whole thing. So I like having something that's laid out, complete this week, et cetera, et cetera. Other people learn very well independently and can just progress as they have time. And honestly, virtual learning makes it a lot easier to upskill without having to disrupt your workday. If we want to jump into talking about how you get your learning, a lot of times now people want to see evidence of what you learn, right? How do I know that you know Tableau? So a lot of the different learning environments offer certifications or badges, or maybe it's even that degree where you've been able to showcase your skills. And even I think Mitch, Jake, and Sunny all mentioned, right, it's maybe building that public profile that you can showcase work that kind of displays not only maybe your interests, right, but the tools you use to kind of teach somebody something or display some sort of information. Here at Tessellation, we do have a learning platform called Data Coach. So maybe we can kind of discuss how that can be used to upskill, and then get into some other tools.
Yeah, I can touch on that. So with Data Coach, I use it mostly with Tableau. I had taken some Tableau courses on another site before, and I thought I do Tableau, but after taking the Tableau Data Coach course, I realized I had no idea what Tableau was. I learned so many things that I didn't even know what existed. And obviously I'm biased coming from Tessellation, but Data Coach is really the best platform that I've taken any courses on. I think the biggest thing that separates it from other courses is the capstone project. So a lot of other virtual learning courses that you take will have a capstone project, which is the final project of the course. But a lot of the times it'll be a data set that they give you and a data problem that they give you. So it's very closed-ended, and you don't have the ability to be creative. But with Tessellation, they make you choose your own data set as well as your own problem. So this makes you think of the tool, not just how to use the tool, but actually how to apply the tool in a real world setting and actually have it make an impact. So that's why I really like it.
Yeah, I think it's awesome to kind of have, it's one thing to just work through and solve somebody else's problems, but when you're forced to apply your learning, right, and kind of validate that learning, I think you tend to retain a lot more of that information. What about some other tools or even partner certifications?
Yeah, I could take that one. So tool certifications, partner certifications, kind of gonna lump these together. Tool certifications, especially when you're trying to become an analyst or any kind of data-centric role, are going to be really important. And there's a lot of debate on, is an MBA even worth it compared to getting certifications. And now you have Google University that's kind of displacing a lot of more traditional methods of learning with getting tools certified. And most of these tools are going to have different certification levels. I myself, I'm Alteryx core certified, but they've got an advanced and they've got an expert now. And then along with that, and that's just going to kind of give you make you a differentiator in the marketplace, where all these all these job descriptions are always going to ask for 3 to 5 years of experience for an entry-level position. Those tools certifications are going to be one of the first things that they look at. Partner certifications are great in the fact that so at Tessellation, we're partnered with a bunch of different technologies. What that gives us is the ability to have additional access to some of their educational resources for learning the product, making sure that we're good at actually getting their product out to the marketplace. And getting partner certified is going to be really important when you actually get the job. So when you're going through this process, it's get your tool certifications, try to get those before you get the job. And then maybe while you're on the job, partner certifications are really important after, just so that you can show that you're certified and actually able to kind of explain those products and work with them with your different clients.
And any other points that you guys want to jump in on in terms of showcasing your work? A question came through that, tool certifications are one thing. Aren't more organizations looking for technical portfolios to be differentiators? I think I can sort of answer that one. I think it depends on the role, right, and the services. So maybe getting the job, I think Jake, Mitch, and Sunny all kind of showcase that they did have some sort of public portfolio or maybe previous work experience portfolio. I can speak to that as well, having had several jobs in this industry. I did kind of, as I work, I create anonymized versions of the work that I've done, because obviously when you're in a work position, right, usually you're dealing with somebody's private data, right, that they don't want shared to everybody. So I think it is important to kind of showcase that work. And I think in a consulting sort of aspect too, right, we're working with clients across a bunch of different industries. So being able to tell stories or use cases of how we helped somebody similar solve a problem is definitely 100%. I think in terms of the market, I see both, right? Some people want to only work with Tableau partners who have all partner certifications, or somebody in Power BI who has a Power BI certification. Like, they want to kind of know that you've taken some sort of test, so that you're not just saying, oh yes, I know how to do this. So to answer that question, I definitely think it's both, and it really depends on who's asking. But that is a very good point. The last two questions, should the workplace provide this? Because obviously a lot of people maybe aren't in that position, right? So maybe they don't have a workplace to provide it, but I think there's ways to accomplish both. So what do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I could talk about that as well. Then I wanted to address there's another question. Someone asked, it's very interesting to know how to convince an HR guy that shifting tools is not the most difficult thing to do. Coming from a sales background on this, and then now using those tools every day, I kind of can see the differences between having to do that. I would say start with a POC, so just a project that you can show value to, because you can do most of these technologies and tools have a demo session, so you can download it for free, create that, and then show value to the HR guy before you actually do it. And then it's not, most of the time, it's not really about replacing an entire tool. It's more about kind of weaning it off. So you start with building out some projects in one of the tools while you're still kind of grandfathering the last of the other one out. So that's one way to do that. And then as far as the workplace providing trainings, I think if if what your job is, if you're going to be a Tableau analyst and you're just going to be in Tableau, then I think there is a certain level of skill that a workplace should provide. You're always going to have to do, you're always going to have to learn on your own outside of that. And luckily now in the information age, we have access to all kinds of different ways, avenues to learn and upskill. I mean, Data Coach, like Sunny said, it is one of the best learning platforms that I've ever used. But like, you know, there's also YouTube. YouTube's free. You can go on YouTube and learn that way. I'm a huge fan of Udemy courses. Those ones they're pretty cheap. They always have sales going on, things like that. So, you know, whatever kind of mode of learning about your tool, you're always going to have to learn it by yourself. But if you're going to be focusing on one, it should always kind of, your workplace is going to provide some resources, and then just the other people that you work with, try to get as much knowledge from them as possible too.
Yeah, and I'll add to that there are, like Jake said, there are a lot of free tools. So I saw some questions coming in the chat. Reminder, guys, if you want me to see it, try and put your questions in the Q&A. But I think Jake kind of already answered, how does one find data to practice and analyze? There are a ton of free sites that just offer data sets on everything. Even if you're not using Tableau, there are several sites like Makeover Monday where they're providing visualizations that have data sets to go with them. There's just a ton of data out there. Happy to connect with me on LinkedIn. I can send you a bunch of resources or share them out, but there's a lot of free data out there. It's probably harder to choose a data set, right? And then somebody else commented, oh, they just got the Data Coach Tableau course. Can this be done with the free version of Tableau? I believe, yes, Tableau Public is free, right? And there's like an online web editing tool that you should be able to do any of those courses with, and it is actually very similar to desktop. So yeah, if you're not already in a role, for example, where you have Tableau or you have Power BI, there should be a free, version, if not even the trial version, that you should be able to use to do some of those courses. And last point on here, very quick, what do you guys think? Jack of all or master of one? My personal opinion is you start off with one, and then as your career grows, your interests grow, you tend to become a jack of all, or maybe a jack of two or three, depending on what you're working on.
Yeah, I can touch on this and add on to it as well. I think definitely it's valuable to have the full cycle and understand everything that's going into it. But if you're really trying to get hired, like first off, if you're just starting, I think it's good to first focus on one and then get into the other ones. And I think another point that I wanted to make is that these tools really aren't that different at the end of the day. I feel like if you understand how to use one of them, like if you understand how to use Tableau, you could do Power BI. And if you know how to do SQL, you could pick up Alteryx pretty quickly. So I think all of these are interrelated, and just because it's separate tools, it's not totally separate thing.
Yep, 100% agree. All right, so now that you've got your technical skill, right, you're sort of figuring out your path of what tools do I use. The next part is your tool is really meaningless, right, if you can't communicate, and that kind of goes two ways, right? You need to be able to figure out what it is that you need to build or the problem that you need to solve, as well as to be able to tell that story, right, or provide that solution. So once you have your technical skill, then it's, how do I sell my expertise? And this may be solving a problem for a client or an end user, or maybe even getting a job, right? How do I prove to somebody that I know Tableau? And this kind of all comes down to communication, which I think is not only important in life in general, but definitely if you're in an analytics role. So I kind of will cover these first three bullets, and communication to me, it's all about practice, right? The more you do something, the same with learning a tool, right? The more you do it, the better you're going to be at it. And what are three ways that I'm going to cover that you can kind of increase your communication skills? Definitely the first one, just like what we're doing today, right? Participate in a webinar. A lot of tools have user groups, right? Participate in a webinar. A lot of companies do blogs, and a lot of people have personal blogs. A blog is a great way to kind of write something out about a solution that you've designed, right? And if you can articulate to somebody how to do something, whether that's in writing, right, or live, just as we're talking now, right? That's a great way to kind of validate your understanding of that tool and kind of even get feedback maybe on how well you do that, right? A lot of times people who blog about content ask for feedback or ask for additional insights into whatever they're writing about. And the community is usually very good at giving that feedback and saying, hey, you can also do this, right? So sometimes giving that information out, you end up learning as well. In addition, I kind of also mentioned user groups, right? I run the Pittsburgh Tableau user group, and I can't tell you that when I took that user group over, I had been using Tableau for maybe a day. So I was very new to Tableau, and I was like, how the heck am I gonna lead hundreds of people into learning Tableau? And I'm not an expert on the tool myself. And I can tell you, just by being an active participant and, leader of that user group, I learned the tool so much quicker, and I just had an access to, this huge network of people that knew things that I didn't, and I knew who to go to, when I had problems, or who to offer insight to. So being a part of a community of people that are maybe using the same tool as you do, and possibly even the same industry, you can really learn a lot. And I can't tell you how awesome it has been to have that network. In addition to that, internal workshops and roundtables. So if you're at a company that uses a particular tool, start an internal user group, right? Present, share your work, right? A lot of times, especially in big organizations, the finance department could be, solving problems in one tool, and the marketing department might be using that same tool, but they're not sharing those ideas. So a lot of times, just kind of using your internal network can help you kind of not only learn the tools, share ideas, not have to reinvent the wheel, right? Use the resources that you have, and, maybe be that expert. You could trade off and, teach someone how to maybe use Alteryx, and they're going to teach you how to use Tableau. So just, again, the more you can participate and interact with different people and learn from different people, the better that those communication skills are going to be. I think a main area, obviously, though, is project work, right? We all have a job. Maybe that job isn't analytics and you're looking to transition. There is probably a problem that you can solve in your job, and there are different ways to work on those communication skills in your job to figure out how to solve those problems and be a better analyst. So let's talk about some project work. Obviously, in the consulting role, there's a lot of steps you go through in terms of finding a solution. And the first step there is requirements gathering, right? How do you figure out what somebody needs?
Yeah, I could touch on this one. So I think the biggest thing with requirements gathering, especially in consulting, is that you're going to be asked to do, like, the client will have an idea in mind of what they want to do, and they'll ask you to do things. But a lot of times what they want isn't totally clear, because if you're just jumping in, you don't have a full view of what they're actually trying to build. So the biggest thing that I think to do is just ask as many clarifying questions as possible. I think a principle that I live by is there are no such thing as a dumb question. There have been many instances where I've asked what could be deemed a dumb question that has ended up saving me in the long run. And I think it's definitely better to ask what could be deemed a dumb question now than to be making a simple mistake somewhere down the road just because you refuse to ask a question earlier on. So just like, if there's anything you're confused about, you want clarification of, just make sure to ask the question. That's definitely the biggest part of communicating with the client.
Okay, so then once you understand what the client needs, right? So that's figuring out, am I understanding the need? Then it comes time to build something, right? And I know in our area, we like to build fast and quick, right? I'd rather get feedback early and often rather than spend a ton of time working on something to figure out that it's not actually what you want. So how do you handle demos and feedback in terms of communicating?
Yeah, I'll take this one. So demos are one of the most important things that we do. And there's a couple reasons. One is you're actually making your tool useful because you're teaching your client how to use it, or the person you work for, how to use it. Second, you're going to get feedback when you're presenting, and that's going to make a better product, and that's good for you and it's good for your client. And then finally, don't underestimate that, a good demo is a way to establish yourself and your company as capable and reliable and worth the money that someone is paying you to do the work. So, I think people who are just starting out, they want to know how to do it well. And so there's, maybe two pieces of advice I'll focus on is always ask yourself, who am I presenting to and what are they going to need from this product. And then as you're presenting, you focus on how that product meets those needs. So if it's a C-suite, often they just want to know, like, quick and fast, is the business going well, yes or no? And so that means that they're probably going to focus on those high level, like, key performance metrics that, they just can look at real quick and say, oh, there's a problem, I need to go down my chain, or, oh, things are looking good, I can move on to the next thing on my agenda. In contrast, if you're working with analysts, they're going to want a really deep dive of everything that your dashboard or your product can do so that they know how to use it. Specifically, often it's going to be, how do they modify the context of the data in the product to get what they specifically need for whatever specific use case they're looking at. And so when you're presenting, think about that and then put yourself in their shoes as you talk about the dashboard. And by that, I mean, I say dashboard or product. By that, I mean, sort of think, okay, I'm going to pretend that I'm you and you're solving this problem. First, I'm going to think about, I need this information. So I'm going to go to this feature of the product. It works this way, and I'm going to get this answer from it. Great. Now, the next thing I'm going to need to know is this. So I'm going to go to this part of the product, and I'm going to find this out in this way. And you step through that logic as if you're them. And that's going to give the most effective presentation to them. And I think it'll especially help them to understand, oh, here's a snag. Oh, like that's not going to work for this reason. And that's going to get you that really good feedback that's going to let you build a better product for them.
Mitch, and I think that goes back to also early and often doesn't mean something that doesn't have to be perfect, right? You're trying to gauge that you're on track. So the importance of demos and feedback is to kind of give that verbal and visual communication of like, hey, here's where I'm starting. So oftentimes start small, right? Don't try to throw the kitchen sink at somebody, because to Mitch's point, right? Really start with what's the question that they told me to answer. And from there, you can always add more, right? But usually once you get too big, right, it's hard to take something away and then things can get clustered. The last two I'm going to kind of lump together. So status reports and handoff documentation. This is more of your written communication, right? To make sure that a project's on track and that your requirements are kind of valid, right? And you're kind of going to deliver what the person is requesting. So how do we handle that sort of written communication?
Yeah, so I could touch on this. In terms of status report, I think for me, the biggest thing is like, for us in terms of consulting, a lot of it is honestly more so for internal use. Like for me, no one else is on my project. So I put out what I accomplish every week, which gives people on the internal side insight of what I've done. And also it's important to do. It doesn't feel like it'd be important to do because like if you're talking to the client all the time, it's like, why do I need to fill out a status report? But it's important to have it as a record because later on, maybe a month from now, there might be a disagreement. They're like, oh, you didn't do this or you didn't do that. But then if you've had a record of the status report of what you've done, it saves you in the end. So having that record is very important.
Yep, and I think the handoff, the documentation too, in addition to a status report, documenting kind of what you've done and giving instructions, right? A lot of times your role can change, or there's people maybe you're working on an internal team and you may not always be the person that needs to break something or fix something when it breaks, et cetera. So having documentation of what you've done, maybe important calculations or important instructions on how you combine data, having that documentation is very, very crucial, especially if you're building a complex solution. I think the last point, the coaching and training, obviously teaching something probably means that you've learned it well enough to explain it to others. So I think that's a really good point. And how does coaching and training kind of help you with those communication skills?
Yeah, I could take over that one. I would say here at Data Coach Tessellation, we're really big on actually making sure that we not only can give you that business value, but we can kind of lead the horse to water, as it were. But for me, for example, like if I'm coding or if I'm building out a dashboard or something, and I get something to work, that's huge for me. I really like that aha moment for when I'm teaching a student, and they not only get something to work, but they understand why it works and how it works. That's huge to me. So that coaching and training, while we're doing consulting jobs, that's going to be huge. It's always an iterative process. But then outside of that, on Data Coach, when we bring in people that have never even used some of these technologies, and now all of a sudden they're the SME at their corporation, it's a pretty big accomplishment for us.
And I think all of the things mentioned above, right, being involved in user groups, doing internal workshops, all of that can be considered training or coaching, right? Anytime you can help somebody else learn something, you're increasing your ability to explain that concept or use that tool. The next factor, and probably most important, is how do we put the first two together, right? How do I put my technical expertise and my communication into a practical application? And this involves dealing with ambiguity. I don't care if you're an internal analyst to a big organization or a consultant, right? We all deal with constant change, right? Problem, the question may change, the person you're dealing with may change, the work may change. So some of the things we want to touch on here are, how do you manage client expectations? And again, when I say client, this doesn't necessarily mean you're a consultant. Remember, this could be an analyst and you're delivering to your boss. So really anybody that you're producing some sort of solution for.
Yeah, I think for people just starting out, there's two reasons this can be really hard. It might be that you're not totally sure what the tool can do yet, and you also don't know how long it will take you to do it, because often it's something you've never done before. So my advice is, how do you handle those two sources of ambiguity, and so that you can set yourself up to meet expectations? And it's really a matter of you have to be able to say, I don't know, let me look into that for you. And you have to become very comfortable with that phrase. And you'll find that with practice, it's faster, easier, and you'll be more confident. And then answering the question of how long will it take, I often consider the cadence of the project. If I'm only checking in once a week, twice a week, I'll probably say that I can do everything because I know that I have the time to figure it out. If you're on a project where you're checking in multiple times a day, you're going to need to be a little more careful. And I tend to think of my days in thirds. And I always say, could a skilled person do this in a third of a day? Probably. I don't know how to do it. I'm going to take 2/3 of a day. And that's just kind of my hard and fast rule to set myself up to, manage expectations of the timing of delivery while, not driving myself crazy, and make sure that I can meet it.
So then how do you manage if the project's changing, right? Someone gets excited, right? You've presented the accounting team with their first ever dashboard and they're like, oh, we want these million other things. So how do you handle what we like to call scope creep and make sure that, you're not kind of over promising and under delivering?
Yeah, I could touch on this one. So scope creep, I feel like the biggest thing with that is that every time you go into a project, you expect it to go a certain way, but it's not always going to go according to plan. A lot of times, the client, maybe they'll want something that originally wasn't there, or they've changed kind of what they're interested in. And I feel like the biggest thing about this that's important is just being adaptable. And also, because I feel like you see the term scope creep and it's immediately a negative connotation in most people's heads, but a lot of the times it can present a new opportunity for more work on your end. So the biggest thing is just being adaptable with it, and then keeping the communication lines going and making sure that both sides are in line with what you're going to be delivering on.
Awesome. I think we already touched on the next one, right? Demoing, prototyping, iterating, right? Your work's always going to evolve. So again, check in and make adjustments as you go. I think I'll lump the last two or the next two. So how do you know when and how to ask for help? Mitch mentioned, I need to gauge how long it might take someone maybe more expert than me versus me. How do I know when to balance figuring something out on my own or possibly reaching out for help, whether that's in your network or outside of your network? And how do you ask the right questions?
Yeah, so I have 3 instances that I focus on, that I know when it's time to ask a question. One is when I definitely can't do something because it's out of my power for some reason. When I can't figure something out in the time frame that I've committed to, and when I suspect that there's a better way to do something, but I just can't find what it might be. Those are kind of where I start with asking myself if it's time to ask. And the culture of asking questions and asking for help can vary from company to company, but I think I have a good framework for you, which is, first, always make a good faith effort to figure it out on your own within the time that's reasonable. And if you can't, to make a small, clear, and simple example case of the problem that someone can help you with. And if you make it simple and clear, it's going to really speed up the process of asking for help and getting it. And then reach out by established channels and really do your best to communicate the problem clearly and that good faith effort you made. That will convince people that, okay, they've really thought about it. It is probably worth my time to help them. And then, if a meeting is needed, this is I think the best advice is start with your row level data and walk them, tell them the problem, start with the data and then walk them up to the issue that you're having. That will make sure that you and the person who's helping you are always on the same page.
Awesome. And I think to that point too, that goes with asking the right questions. I think that's both to the client and maybe somebody that you're asking for help. Don't ask maybe a yes/no question when you need more detail. So I think, Mitch, you kind of covered that one too, right? Be as specific as possible so that you're getting kind of the most information back. And I think the moral of the story here, no matter what role you're in, expect the unexpected and be willing to change, and don't necessarily think of change as a bad thing, right? You created something for someone and they're like, nope, that's not at all what I want. That doesn't necessarily mean that you did something wrong, but maybe you presented an answer and they're like, okay, yeah, that is the answer that I asked for, but that's not exactly what I want. So don't necessarily take change as a bad thing, right? It just means that you provided something to someone, they were informed, and that's now maybe pivoting them in a different direction. So always kind of look at analytics as a learning experience, and that it's really a never-ending process, right? Because we're always going to have new information and we're always going to be presenting that information in new ways. So I think I want to skip just because we're running on time here. I think the next point is important and I want to hit on it. So goal setting, it's great to learn a tool and work on all of these things, but how do you know that you're progressing, right? How do you check in? And I'll just ask you guys to touch quickly on it. So basically, how do you set goals, both short and long term? And how do you monitor your progress and get help along the way to determining if you're on track and where you should go?
I've got 3 things that I think everyone should do. First and foremost, keep your ear to the ground about everything, about the tools that people are using, the problems that they're solving. That will help inspire you to know what you want to do. Second, seek out mentorship, someone who's going to, has seen more than you and can help you navigate getting to where you want to get. And plan in small, discrete steps that you can accomplish in short spurts. That will keep you motivated to achieve that long-term goal that seems really intimidating at times.
Yeah, I just want to echo what Mitch was saying about monitoring your progress. It's definitely, analytics is a long journey. It's not going to happen in a day, but with consistent effort, you're going to be able to learn things and pick things up. So I think it's important to, save everything that you've done, like all the Tableau dashboards that you've built. Like for me, I've done that, and I look at some of the dashboards that I built in the past compared to what I've done now. It's like, wow, it's night and day. But like when you're actually in the weeds of it, it doesn't feel like you're progressing. So having that record is important. And also echoing what Mitch said about keeping your ear to the ground. I think just being involved in the different communities is super important. I know, it's a big Tableau community, a big Alteryx community. I know there's, data science communities out there. There's different analytics communities on LinkedIn. And I think just having exposure to those and understand what's going on is good to monitor your progress. You can also compare how you're doing to others in the field, which is really helpful.
Yeah, and determining your next steps is kind of what track you want to go along. Are you going to be the jack of all trades or a master at one tool? Continually just iterate your own process too. All of these things are really good to do. And I think everyone here has brought up some really good points on how to set yourself up for success. The way you determine next steps is partially internal and then partially kind of what your business needs. So then just reach back out and continue to learn all the time.
Awesome. And I think I'll touch on, each of our analysts here at Tessellation is assigned a mentor. I personally have never been assigned a mentor in a role. So I'm very jealous of that experience that they're having, but I've always had mentors outside of my professional, my direct role. So I think it's important to have a mentor, and this person may not even need to be aware of you, right? Maybe it's just someone that you idolize, right? You love their experiences, their role, and that's something you aspire to. reach out and say hi, right? Say, hey, you know, I love the work that you're doing. I aspire to do the same. You know, start a conversation. I know, especially in data analytics, people are very helpful. And, you know, if you find someone that you aspire to be, reach out to them. I'm sure they're happy to check in with you. And I've heard a lot of awesome stories in the analytics community of people just, you know, linking up, and sometimes you might find yourself in that position and, you know, helping out when maybe you got help before. So definitely look to your community for help. Before we do our show and tell portion, I think there's a really good question that came through, and it's about asking questions. So they said the hardest part of analytics is knowing what questions to ask, and basically how do you like lead a business person who may not be very good at kind of telling you what they want to turn that in. I think my best advice would be turn their question into something that's measurable. So constantly ask how and why, you know, what are you doing with this answer, or how do you define that metric, and literally have them spell it out for you, right? So simply saying like, I want to know my sales for last year. Okay, well, how do you determine your sales? Where is that coming from? So really asking leading questions, because if you can't directly feel like you have the knowledge to answer the question that they're asking, you really have to break it down into measurable parts and quantify as much as you can. So the more detail that you have, it is a skill that is learned. So I would say, you know, the more you're in the role, the better you will be at that. And it is definitely something, you know, hard to do. All right, with the few minutes we have, I just wanted to do a quick show and tell so that they can kind of show you something that they've worked on. So Jake, if you want to quickly go over in about a minute, so we can leave like a minute or two for any final questions or wrap up.
Yep, I'll wrap this up real fast. Yeah, thanks for that question, Dean. That was a really good question. You were actually the part of the inspiration for this this workflow. So Dean, I know, is a huge basketball guy. Also, I was talking to another Ultrix ace. His name's Ken Black. He is really big on basketball, especially in Chicago. So one of the biggest questions that NBA fans always ask is, who's the better player, Michael Jordan, LeBron James, or Kobe Bryant? And so I wanted to build an analytical app in Alteryx that proves in a statistical way who the better player was just on paper. So this workflow looks really big. Data Coach provided me the lessons to learn how to do all of this. But it pulls from an API from an NBA statistics website, and then pulls everything through. And I created a macro, and I was pretty impressed with the photoshopping skills on this NBA macro that I made. It's Kobe Bryant and the NBA logo with the tessellation symbol as his jersey. Jen, if you want to go to the next slide real quick. So the output of this analytical app, it allows the user to pick from a few options, and they get an output based on what their selections are. So the first one gives an overall view of who the better player was. Spoiler alert, I do have this on the community page. There's an article, I can link it in the chat, but LeBron James is the winner. I know that kind of hurts a lot of NBA fans' feelings, but and me too, but it's okay. And then the second parts are, you can pick different statistics to look at based on either regular season or in the playoffs. And that's pretty much that analytical app. And I'll link my community posts if anyone is interested in learning more about it.
Awesome, thanks, Jake.
Yeah, my next. So this is the dashboard that I made for my Tableau Advanced capstone. I had a Spotify dashboard. I was just kind of looking through some of the different statistics that I make a fun one. So this first slide right here, on the left, you have a map where with all the artists' birthplaces, and I set up a dashboard action. So if you click on a person's name, like right there, clicked on Ariana Grande, and then it shows her artist page as well as the songs, so you can listen to them. You want to go to the next page? And then this one is the rest of the dashboard. So I mapped artists by a few different stats. And then I also set up these where you can compare different artists. And I would like to call out something that I learned through Data Coach, is just setting up interactivity of the dashboards and being able to change different fields and change different analysis. And that's definitely something that was super interesting to learn.
Thanks, Sunny.
Yeah, and so we're out of time here, so I'll just give you the punchline, which is that a dashboard does not have to do a lot of really fancy things to add value for a business. All this dashboard does is report values in a database that they couldn't see all in one place before, and it saves them a bunch of hours on their work.
Awesome. Thank you, Mitch. I think I hopefully answered all the questions that came through. If you do have additional questions, again, feel free to connect to us on LinkedIn. And I'm just going to send it to Adam real quick to wrap us up and tell you about some upcoming events that we have.
Yeah, well done, everybody. Very, very impressive. Couple things to point out here on the right. This is a 6-minute assessment geared around your organization's digital transformation. So if you're within an organization right now and feel like there could be some room for improvement, 6-minute assessment. More importantly, Power BI Power Hour coming up in 2 days with Spencer Bauke. If you are interested, which a lot of people on this webinar are, on breaking into analytics, I would definitely hit up this one. Spencer's going to go into some advanced things as far as Power BI is concerned, but I'm sure you'll pick up a nugget or two. And with that, we're going to end. Well done, everybody. Thank you so much. Thanks for everybody tuning in, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everybody.